Your body is constantly doing weird things that you've probably Googled at 2 a.m. in a panic, from eyelids that won't stop twitching, to tongues that look like topographic maps, to a syndrome that literally makes you feel like you're shrinking. Today, I'm breaking down every level of weird body sign and when you should actually worry, starting with one that's driven basically everyone insane: eye twitching, myokymia. Your left eyelid has been going off for 3 days straight. You're convinced everyone can see it. You're convinced it means something terrible. Here's the thing: nobody can see it, and it almost certainly means nothing. Eyelid myokymia is just your orbicularis oculi muscle having a little involuntary tantrum. Nearly every human on the planet will experience this, and the cause is embarrassingly mundane: too much coffee, not enough sleep, staring at a screen for 9 hours straight. That's the villain. The common fear is that any facial twitch means MS, Parkinson's, or a stroke. Turns out, no. Benign myokymia doesn't progress into any of those. It's reversible, harmless, and usually disappears the moment you get some rest and put the coffee down. The only time you should worry is if it sticks around for weeks, spreads across your face, or shows up with drooping, weakness, or double vision. Otherwise, your eyelid is just being dramatic. But if you think a twitching eye is unsettling, wait until you look down at your fingernails and notice something that's been there for years without you realizing it. Vertical ridges on fingernails. You're sitting there, maybe bored, maybe anxious, and you look down at your fingernails, and there they are, little lines running from base to tip, like tiny grooves carved into the surface. Some you can barely see, others you can actually feel. Naturally, you Google it. The internet will tell you those ridges mean you're deficient in iron or biotin, or that your liver is staging a quiet revolt. Some articles practically diagnose you with organ failure from a thumbnail, which is, not ideal. Here's the thing: those vertical ridges are almost always just your nails getting older. The nail matrix, the little factory under your cuticle that pumps out keratin, starts producing it slightly unevenly over time. Different sections grow at different rates, and you get ridges. It's the nail equivalent of a gray hair. Completely normal, completely boring. Now, if ridges show up suddenly, get dramatically worse, or come with brittleness or discoloration, that's different. That could point to something like lichen planus or an actual nutritional deficiency. But mild symmetrical ridging across all your nails, that's just time passing. But if you think your nails quietly aging is a weird thing to spiral about, wait until you find out what a handful of pine nuts can do to every meal you eat for the next 3 weeks. Bitter taste. Pine nut syndrome. Imagine sitting down to your favorite meal, something you've eaten 100 times, and every single bite tastes like you're chewing on a handful of pennies. Not because anything is wrong with the food, because your mouth has decided, completely on its own, to betray you. That's pine nut syndrome, and it is exactly as frustrating as it sounds. Here's how it works. You eat some pine nuts, maybe in a salad, maybe in a pesto, maybe straight out of the bag, like some kind of forest squirrel. Everything seems fine. Then, 1 to 3 days later, a persistent bitter or metallic taste shows up in your mouth and just refuses to leave. We're talking days to weeks of every meal being filtered through this awful, uninvited flavor. Chocolate tastes bitter. Fruit tastes bitter. Your morning coffee somehow tastes even more bitter than coffee already is, and not everyone gets it. You can eat pine nuts your entire life with 0 issues. Then one specific batch takes you out. Investigators have traced most outbreaks to particular species, specifically Pinus armandii, and to nuts that may have been improperly stored or partially oxidized. The leading theory is that certain lipid oxidation products mess with your taste receptors, and the delayed onset suggests your body has to metabolize something first before the sabotage kicks in. Here's where the anxiety spiral starts. Most people don't connect. I ate pine nuts 3 days ago with everything tastes like a battery. So they assume the worst: liver disease, heavy metal poisoning, neurological decline, which means anxious trips to the doctor and tests that all come back perfectly normal. The reality is straightforward. If you recently ate pine nuts and your only symptom is a bitter taste with 0 other red flags, you're almost certainly fine. Your taste receptors will reset on their own once the triggering metabolites clear out. But if you think your tongue betraying you is strange, wait until you find out about the people who sneeze every single time they look at the sun. Photic sneeze reflex, If you've ever walked outside on a bright day and immediately sneezed 2 or 3 times for absolutely no reason, congratulations. You have a genetic quirk that scientists decided to name ACHOO syndrome. And yes, that is a real acronym. It stands for Autosomal Dominant Compelling Helio-Ophthalmic Outburst. Somebody got paid to come up with that, which is, not ideal. Here's what's actually happening. When bright light hits your retina, the signal travels through your optic nerve, and in about 18 to 35% of people, that signal spills over into the neighboring trigeminal nerve, which controls your sneeze reflex. Your brain gets its wires crossed. Light comes in through the eyes, and your nose thinks something just crawled into it. 1 to 3 sneezes later, it's over. The common assumption is that you're reacting to pollen the second you step outside. Nope, there's zero irritant involved. It's purely neurological cross-activation, and it's hereditary. If one of your parents has it, you've got a solid chance of inheriting it too. The whole thing is completely benign and stays with you for life. The only real concern is occupational. Pilots sneezing uncontrollably during a critical moment is less than ideal. But unless your episodes come with other neurological symptoms, you're fine. Your brain is just a little too enthusiastic about sharing information between departments. But if you think crossed wires in your nervous system are strange, wait until you see what your tongue can do without telling you. Geographic tongue. Open your mouth, look in the mirror, and discover what appears to be a topographical map of Europe printed on your tongue. That's geographic tongue, and it looks way worse than it actually is. Here's what's happening. Your tongue is normally covered in tiny hair-like projections called filiform papillae. In about 1 to 3% of people, random patches of these papillae just vanish, leaving smooth, red areas bordered by raised whitish edges. The result looks like continents drifting across your tongue. And I do mean drifting, because the patches actually migrate. A spot that's there on Monday might be gone by Thursday, only for a new one to appear somewhere else entirely. The whole thing is essentially your tongue's version of a screensaver that nobody asked for. Now, here's where the panic sets in. You see red patches with irregular borders inside your mouth, and your brain immediately screams cancer, or thrush, or some horrifying infection you picked up from a gas station drinking fountain, but it's completely benign. The inflammation pattern under a microscope actually resembles psoriasis, which is interesting but not dangerous. The real inconvenience is dietary. Those exposed patches are sensitive, so spicy food, citrus, anything acidic basically lights your tongue on fire. Some people restructure their entire diet around avoiding hot sauce, which is, not ideal. The key distinction is movement. If a lesion stays fixed in one spot or starts ulcerating, get it checked. But classic geographic tongue, with its wandering map pattern, totally harmless. But if you think a tongue that redraws itself is strange, wait until you meet the people whose skin literally writes back. Dermatographia, skin writing. Your body is an etch-a-sketch, and nobody gave you the receipt. Dermatographia, literally meaning skin writing, is a condition where lightly scratching your skin produces raised, red, itchy welts that trace the exact path of whatever touched you. Draw a smiley face on your forearm with a fingernail. Congratulations, you now have a smiley face embossed on your forearm. It puffs up within minutes, stays for about 30 to 60 minutes, then vanishes like nothing happened. Around 2 to 5% of people have this. Here's what's actually going on. Your mast cells, the little immune sentinels hanging out in your skin, have an abnormally low activation threshold. Normal people get scratched, and their mast cells shrug it off. Your mast cells panic and dump histamine everywhere. That histamine dilates blood vessels, leaks plasma into surrounding tissue, and lights up sensory nerves. Redness, swelling, itch, all from a light scratch. The biggest misconception is that people think they're allergic to whatever object touched them. Scratch yourself with a pen. I'm allergic to pens. You're not allergic to anything specific. Your skin just overreacts to friction, period. Which also means visible welts can get misread by other people as signs of self-harm or abuse, a genuinely awful social side effect of an otherwise harmless condition. The good news is antihistamines handle it pretty easily. For most people with dermatographia, it's a weird party trick stapled to a mildly annoying itch. And speaking of your body doing things without your permission, wait until you hear what happens the exact moment you fall asleep. Hypnagogic jerks. You're drifting off, finally at peace, and then bam, your entire body convulses like you just got tased by a ghost. Up to 70% of people experience these hypnagogic jerks, and they are exactly as unsettling as they sound. Your brain is basically shifting its neurochemical environment from awake and alert to asleep and paralyzed. But during that handoff, the balance between excitation and inhibition gets unstable. Your muscles relax, your proprioceptive feedback changes, and your brain misinterprets this as you actively falling through the air. So it does the logical thing and fires a massive corrective startle response. You get a jolt, a surge of adrenaline, and the vivid sensation of tumbling off a building. The whole event lasts 1 to 2 seconds. Zero confusion, just pure cardiovascular betrayal right at the threshold of sleep, which is, not ideal. Here's where it gets complicated. A lot of people quietly assume these jerks are minor seizures or early signs of epilepsy. Turns out, no. Hypnagogic jerks lack the characteristic EEG patterns of seizures entirely. They're just your motor control temporarily misfiring as the brain changes shifts. Sleep deprivation, stress, excessive caffeine, and erratic sleep schedules all make them way more likely. And that sets up a vicious cycle, because being anxious about jerking awake makes it harder to relax, which makes you more likely to jerk awake. Your partner, meanwhile, gets kicked in the shin at 2 a.m. Occasional jerks are completely benign. The concern threshold only triggers if they happen multiple times nightly alongside other abnormal movements. But at least that weirdness fades the second you wake up. Wait until you hear about the sensation that convinces your throat something is physically stuck inside it. No matter how many times you swallow, transient, globus sensation, lump in throat. You know that feeling when you're convinced something is stuck in your throat, so you swallow again and again, and it's still there, except nothing is there. Nothing has ever been there. Welcome to globus sensation, where your throat gaslights you 24 hours a day. Here's the thing. Up to 5% of all new ENT referrals are people walking in saying there's a lump in my throat. They get scoped, scanned, examined, and the doctor finds absolutely nothing, which, is not as reassuring as it sounds when you can literally feel the thing sitting there like a marble lodged behind your Adam's apple. The paradox that makes this truly maddening is that swallowing actual food often relieves the sensation. You eat a sandwich, it goes away, but swallowing saliva makes it worse. Oh, you're just swallowing nothing. Let me remind you I exist. Biologically, it's a combination of sensory pathways turning the volume up to 11, muscle tension locking your throat into a low-grade clench, and sometimes acid reflux keeping everything hypersensitive. Your brain starts amplifying totally normal sensations and interpreting them as something solid. Stress makes the muscles tighter. Tighter muscles make the sensation worse. Worse sensation makes you more stressed. You see where this is going. But here's where the real damage happens. Everyone's first thought is cancer. That association is so deeply embedded that even after a perfectly clean examination, people remain unconvinced. They clear their throat obsessively. They go back for second and third opinions. The anxiety feeds directly back into the muscle tension causing the sensation, creating a loop that can persist for months. The actual alarm features that warrant concern are true: dysphagia, painful swallowing, unexplained weight loss, hoarseness, or bleeding. Without those, your throat is just being dramatic. But if you think a phantom lump messing with your survival instincts is unsettling, wait until your brain decides to simulate a bomb going off inside your skull while you're falling asleep. Exploding head syndrome. The name alone sounds like something that should kill you instantly. Exploding head syndrome. That's not a medical condition. That's a death scene in a horror movie, but it's real. It's surprisingly common, and it's almost entirely harmless, which is, not ideal branding for something that affects up to 18% of adults at least once. Here's what actually happens. You're drifting off to sleep, hovering in that liminal zone between awake and unconscious, and then your brain detonates. A gunshot, a thunderclap, a bomb going off inside your skull. The whole event lasts less than a second. There's no actual pain, but your heart is suddenly pounding. You're drenched in adrenaline, and you are absolutely convinced something catastrophic just happened inside your head. It didn't. The leading theory is that your brain's sensory shutdown process gets desynchronized during the sleep-wake transition. Normally, your auditory pathways power down in an orderly fashion as you fall asleep, but sometimes that deactivation misfires, and creates an aberrant burst of neural activity your brain interprets as an enormous sound. Think of it like a computer crashing instead of shutting down gracefully, loud, startling, ultimately meaningless. The real damage isn't physical, it's psychological. People wake up genuinely believing they've had a stroke. They lie there in the dark, Googling explosion in head while sleeping at 3 a.m., then they're too terrified to fall back asleep, which wrecks their sleep quality, which makes them more susceptible to another episode, which makes them more afraid. Beautiful little cycle of misery, all from something that poses zero actual danger. Reassurance and better sleep hygiene are usually the only prescription. But if you think a fake explosion is bad, wait until your skin starts crawling with insects that don't exist. Formication, skin crawling. Your skin is lying to you, not subtly, in a vivid, absolutely convincing way, where every nerve ending screams something is crawling on you, burrowing into you, and there is nothing there. That's formication, named after the Latin word for ant, which is either poetic or deeply cruel. The sensation shows up in menopause, peripheral neuropathy, alcohol withdrawal, and stimulant use. It can be a brief flicker or a relentless full-body crawling that dominates every waking moment. And here's the thing, the feeling is real. The cause isn't. Your somatosensory pathways are misfiring. Damaged nerves fire on their own, sending signals your brain must interpret as something is on your skin. Your brain receives crawling data, so it reports crawling. It's being lied to by its own hardware. But here's where it gets tragic. In some people, the sensation becomes a belief. Delusional parasitosis. They become certain they're infested. They scratch until they bleed. They collect skin flakes in matchboxes and bring them to doctors as proof. This is the matchbox sign, and it's one of the saddest things in dermatology. Every negative examination gets dismissed. The feeling is too primal. Humans are hardwired to fear infestation, and when your nervous system confirms the fear, logic loses. The other side is equally damaging. People dismiss formication as just anxiety, which is like telling someone with a broken leg that walking hurts because they think about it too much. The sensation is a genuine neurological event requiring genuine investigation. Treatment needs dermatologic, neurological, and psychiatric care because the symptom generates at literally every level of the nervous system, from fingertip to frontal lobe, which is not ideal. If you think invisible bugs are bad, wait until we talk about a condition where your body decides to be aroused 24 hours a day against your will. Persistent genital arousal disorder, PGADO. Imagine your body is constantly producing the physical signs of intense arousal, but your mind is completely uninterested. Now imagine that sensation never stops. That is persistent genital arousal disorder, or PGAD, and it is absolute torture. Sufferers experience unwanted engorgement, throbbing, or the feeling of imminent orgasm for hours or even days at a time, completely divorced from any actual sexual desire. Sitting down, riding in a car, or even mild stress can trigger it. And here's the really cruel part. Orgasm doesn't fix it. It might provide temporary relief for a few minutes, but then the sensations roar right back. The hardware is firing nonstop while the software is desperately trying to shut it down. Biologically, this happens because the neural circuits and vascular mechanisms controlling genital arousal become completely dysregulated. Sometimes peripheral factors like nerve compression, Tarlov cysts near the sacral nerve roots, or pelvic floor hypertonicity generate ectopic firing, meaning the nerves just spam arousal signals to the brain with zero context. Certain medications like SSRI withdrawal or hormonal shifts can also flip this switch on and break it off entirely, which is, not ideal. But the real horror isn't just the physical exhaustion. It's the profound misconception that PGAD is basically hypersexuality. People assume sufferers have some insatiable itch they want scratched. Turns out, no. The sensations are intrusive, painful, and completely unwelcome. This trivializing assumption isolates patients, destroys relationships, and piles shame on top of already unbearable physical distress. The evidence base is painfully thin too, because it's so rare and stigmatized. Documented cases number in the low hundreds, leaving sufferers struggling just to find a doctor who validates their reality. But if you think your body turning against your own desires is agonizing, wait until you see what happens when it turns against your entire perception of reality. Alice in Wonderland syndrome, Your hands are growing, not literally, but your brain is absolutely convinced they are. The room is shrinking, the hallway stretches into infinity, and time feels like it's dripping through wet concrete. You're not dreaming. You're not on anything. You're experiencing what might be the most disorienting thing a human brain can do to itself while still technically functioning. Alice in Wonderland syndrome is exactly what it sounds like. Objects appear drastically smaller or impossibly larger than they actually are. Your own body parts feel like they belong to someone 3 times your size. Distances warp, time bends, and episodes can hit in clusters, lasting anywhere from a few seconds to several minutes, then vanishing like nothing happened. Here's where most people get it wrong. The name makes it sound whimsical, like some daydream disorder inspired by too much Lewis Carroll. It's not. AIOBUs is a neurophysiological disturbance rooted in dysfunction of the occipital and parietal lobes, the regions responsible for integrating visual input and spatial representation. In migraine sufferers, cortical spreading depression, a wave of abnormal electrical activity rolling across the brain, disrupts the neural scale your brain uses to interpret size and distance. Epileptic discharges can do the same thing. So can viral infections like Epstein-Barr. It's most common in children, which makes it even more terrifying. Try explaining to a 7-year-old that their bedroom isn't actually collapsing inward. The fear of going crazy is real and persistent. Anyone experiencing recurrent distortions like this needs a full neurological workup. Treating the underlying migraine or epilepsy often reduces or eliminates episodes entirely. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.